Hello and welcome to the Futures Lab. So this week we are going to be making a spear attack that is inspired by the Undertale character Undyne. We're going to create these spears outside of the player box, point them at the player heart, and they're going to move towards the player heart and then delete themselves once they reach the other end of the screen. So the first thing that we need to do is draw our new costume for our projectile sprite. So first click on your projectile sprite, then click on costumes, and then in the bottom left corner, make sure you go up to paint. We're going to name this costume. I'm going to name this spear. And then we're going to draw our costume. I'm going to make sure that there's no outline. I'm going to make it in white. Now, of course, your costume can be something different, as long as it is pointing towards the right. That's very important. So I found a good way of making a spear was to start off with a circle. And then if you use this tool here, the reshape tool. Now there are ways of doing this that are a bit neater, but I'm okay with how this looks. Okay. Now we can change the way that this looks later, especially if it's too big or too small, so we can come back to this, but for now this is a nice little pointy spear that should work. We're going to go back to the code now. So we're going to make another my block that's going to control the spear attack. So let's go across to the red category my blocks, then up in the top left corner click on make a block. We're going to name this spear. Now I'm going to make this in capitals, and I'm going to start off by putting in our repeat input. So I'm just going to put repeat after that, and then I'm going to click on add an input, and I'm going to call this R. If you've done the other attacks, you'll know where we're going with this input. So press OK, and let's move our define spear somewhere where we've got some space underneath it. Okay, so first off, let's keep an eye on what some of our other sprites, what some of our other attacks have at the beginning of them. As a bit of a reminder, we're going to need to decide what our projectile spawn rate is. So let's go to variables, get out set projectile spawn rate. Let's start off at 0.5. We can change that number later if we want. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get out, we're going to go to looks, get out a switch costume to spear, and look near the bottom for go to front layer, because we need to make sure that we can see these spears even when they are outside the box. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to control, get out a repeat 10, put that there. Now we can get this R and put it over the repeat. So now we want to start spawning our spears. Now the problem is we want these to be random, but if we just set something up very simply with just a simple set of random numbers for the X and Y variable, then we'll end up spawning the spears on the inside of the box as well as the outside, which is not what we want. Now we solved this problem with the scatter attack. However, this time round, I don't want the spears to all come from just one direction like they did with the scatter attack. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a set of if then else statements that are going to use random numbers to decide where a spear is going to spawn. Now there are other ways of doing this, but I quite like this one, so stick with me and you'll see how it works at the end. What we need to do is we need to go to control, and we need to get out an if then else. Put that inside the repeat, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go to operators, and we're going to get out an equals operator, put that in between the if and the then, Then get out a pick random 1 to 10, put that in the first section of our equals operator, but change the 10 to 2 and change the 50 to 1. So this is going to make a random number between 1 and 2, and if the answer was 1, then it's going to do one thing, and if the answer was something else, i.e. 2, then it's going to do something else. So this is a coin flip. Like when you flip a coin, there are only 2 possible random outcomes to that, heads or tails, 1 or 2. So this is going to be very useful, and we're going to use a couple of these to decide where the spears are spawning from. So if our random number comes up as 1, what we're going to do is we're going to go to motion, the dark blue category. We're going to get out our set x, put that underneath our if, and we are going to decide a random point along the x coordinate. So we want this to be kind of outside of the box. So let's start off with maybe minus 150 to 150. So let's go to operators. Let's get out a pick random 1 to 10, put that inside our set x, make the lowest number minus 150 and the highest number 150. If you want to change these numbers, you can. If you were to make this minus 160 to 160, then it will spawn in a slightly wider area. And if you make it, let's say, minus 140 to 140, it will spawn in a narrower area. So that's good. And now what we're going to do is, now that we've decided where our spear is going to be on a random point in terms of left and right, we are either going to make it on top of the box or on the bottom of the box. So we're going to go to control, get out another if then. This needs to go directly underneath our set x. We're going to do another coin flip. So you can actually just hover over this equals and right click, then duplicate and drop that in between our new if and then. We've got ourselves another random coin flip bit of code. Then we're going to go to motion, the dark blue category. We're going to get out a set y and another set y. Put them in the if and the that and the else. So if our random number comes up as 1, then we're going to set the y to, let's say, 100. That should be above the box. And if we want it to be the bottom of the box, let's say minus 160. That seems reasonable. Now, all we need to do is do something very similar for this gap right here. So we're going to get out a set y, put it inside that gap, and we are going to make this another random number. Let's go to operators, get out a pick random, and we're going to make this between minus 160 and 100. And then we're going to copy this if then else statement, right click right here and duplicate, normal click on duplicate, and drop this right underneath our set y. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so you guys can see this. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pull out these set y's, throw them away, because what we need is some set x's. We've already set a random y variable in terms of up and down of where our spear is. Now we need to decide, is it going to be on the left side or the right side? So let's get out a set x2 and another set x2. And let's make this minus 150 to 150. Now, as I've said before, have an experiment with these numbers. See if you can change, especially if your box is a slightly different size of mine, you might need to change some of these numbers to widen the range, change where the spears are spawning. So now we need to point the spears towards the player and create the clone. Let's have a look near the bottom. What we need to do is we need to go to motion, the dark blue category. We need to pull out a point towards, and this needs to go right here. It needs to happen after all of our if, then, else's have finished doing their thing. So we need to go point towards heart. We need to create a clone. Let's go to control for create a clone of myself. Pop it just there. And we also need to wait. Let's pull out a wait 1 second, but let's go to variables, get out our projectile spawn rate, put that right in the 1. Now what we need to do is make sure that our spear attack is in our forever loop. So have a look for our forever loop. It should be underneath when green flag clicked. And you can see we've got a bunch of our other attacks in there. Just pull them out for the time being. Let's pull out a spear repeat 10. Let's put that inside the forever loop. Now let's give this a test. So, we've run into a problem, haven't we? The spears that are on the bottom, when they spawn, they just delete themselves straight away. You can see them flashing up there. It's because they're already touching the edge. And remember, all of our projectiles delete themselves once they've touched the edge. So let's fix this problem first, shall we? Let's stop our test, go back to the code. What we're going to do is we're going to look for when I start as clone. I'm going to zoom in on this so you guys can see it. So there's actually a pretty cool solution to this. We're going to right click on our repeat until, normal click on duplicate, move this off to the side for now. We need to get rid of this wait and delete, and then take this whole thing and put it directly underneath the show. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to operators, and we're going to get out a not operator. Drag that out, put our touching edge in, and take the whole thing back into our first repeat until. So now, whenever a projectile is spawned already touching the edge, it's going to first move until it is not touching the edge before it does any of the rest of its code, which is quite useful and might be kind of useful for the placement of some of your other projectiles as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to give this a test, see if it works. Okay, that's good. The spears on the bottom are moving and they're not deleting themselves straight away. I think they're a bit large, so I think I'm going to make them a bit smaller later. But another thing I'd like to do is make it so that the player has a chance to see where the spears are before they start moving, so they can kind of react rather than just appearing straight away. I think I'd like to make them fade in. So let's put in some code to make that happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to looks. We're going to get out set color effect and put that right underneath where we've got our show. Let's click on color and let's click on ghost. Now we want to set the ghost effect to 100. So this ghost effect is going to make the spears entirely invisible, and we can make them slowly become more visible if we reduce the ghost effect. So we're going to go to control. We're going to get out a repeat 10, and we're going to put that right underneath set ghost effect, but all this stuff here needs to be outside of our repeat 10. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to looks, get out change color effect. We are going to change our ghost effect by -10. When the effect is set to 100, it's complete. The sprite is entirely ghosted, and when we slowly reduce the ghost effect, it's going to become more and more visible. Let's have a look and see what that looks like. Okay, I quite like that effect. The sort of spears are kind of slowly fading in. Now, the problem is that we might not want all of our projectiles to fade in. So let's create a variable that controls whether or not they fade in or not. So let's go to variables. let's click on make a variable. Now, very important, let's click on for this sprite only. And that way the sprites will have individual variables that are unique to each one of the clones, whether or not they're meant to fade in or not. So we're going to call this fade in. Nice and simple. And let's press OK. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go to control. We're going to get out an if then, and this needs to go just underneath show, but get that first repeat until and drag everything below it. So our if is only around our ghost code, our fading in code. Let's go to operators. Let's get out an equals operator, put it between the if and the then. Let's go to variables, get out fade in, put it in the first socket of our equals operator, and then click on where it says 50 and change it to yes. So if fade in equals yes, then do the ghost code, make them fade in. Now while we're here, what we can do is we can make the spears fade out as well. Now you can do this in the same way with the fade in, and you can even create another variable called fade out. But for now, I'm just going to make it so that all of the projectiles fade out. So let's go down to the bottom of this code, and can you see we've got our wait 0.2 seconds? We put that wait in so that the clones would stop just for a fraction of a second and stay in place before they deleted themselves. And this was really useful for seeing when clones are creating themselves and then immediately deleting themselves. It's really good for solving problems. But we shouldn't need this anymore because we're going to put in our fade out code. So pull this, delete this code off to the side, get wait 0.2, delete it. Let's go to control, get out repeat 10, go to looks, and get out change ghost effect by 10, and then put our delete this clone back on the bottom. So now the fade out is going to happen to all of the projectiles once they hit the edge and are about to delete themselves. As I said before, you can use what you've learned, what you're about to learn with the fade in code on fade out as well. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to put in each of our attacks whether or not the sprites are going to fade in or not fade in. So let's zoom out and let's have a look at define scatter. Now I've decided I don't want scatter to fade in. So I'm going to go to variables, get out set fade in, put it right underneath define scatter, and I'm going to set fade in to no. Now the long attack, the walls attack, you can make a decision now. I'm going to say no, I don't want it to fade in, but I can always change my mind later. Set fade in to no, but then we're going to get out set fade in, put it underneath our spear attack. I'm going to set the fade in to yes. Okay, that all looks pretty good. Let's give this a little test. And what we should find now is that the spears fade themselves out. Now for finishing touches, I'm going to change this spear so it's a bit smaller. Now, very important, if you're making that your spear sprite is centered. Well, that's a lot better. I think the spearhead is maybe a little too narrow. Might make that just a little bit bigger. Okay, I quite like that. So you can decide on how large or small you want your sprites to be, entirely up to you. And you'll notice it's a lot easier for me to dodge them now that I can see them coming as they fade in. And what we're doing by creating a variable that controls certain behaviors of our sprites is pretty similar to how object-oriented programming works, where you have different clones or objects having different properties. So as you create your own attacks, you can decide which of these properties your attack's going to have. Will it fade in at the beginning? That kind of thing. So I'm happy with how that looks. There's one more thing I'm going to change. I'm just going to create just a little bit more variation, because I don't know if you notice, if I don't move, I think it's a little too perfect how the arrows are always coming directly for you. I'm going to make it just slightly varied. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for our define spear code, look to the very bottom, right underneath where we've got point towards heart. We're going to go to operators. First, we're going to go to motion, and we're going to get out a turn. Doesn't matter which turn. And then we're going to go to operators. We're going to get out pick random, and I'm going to set it to -10 to 10 degrees. So when it spawns, it's going to turn just a little bit, maybe, not always. And that's going to make the spears just a little bit more difficult to predict, but a little bit more varied, and I quite like that. So that's all we have time for this week. I hope you had fun. We've got more attacks to do, and also we've got an entire HP system to build in later weeks. Have a bit of an experiment with some of these numbers, some of these coordinates. See if you can adapt the game to suit your particular version of it even better. Don't forget to subscribe, ring the bell to see the next episode. And aside from that, stay awesome, be cool to each other, and take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time, ninjas.